There's nothing quite as intellectually eye-opening as the puritanical, self-righteous virtue signaling of a collectivist. And what better place to find it than National Public Radio, which just pushed, without embarrassment, the idea that Americans should decolonize their bookshelves of whiteness. Yeah. Leftist prejudice on overdrive, even as they colonize the radio using your tax money. The blindly puritanical tendency of collectivists to infuse every nuance of life with identity politics, subsuming individual thought and expression, even individual preference, beneath postmodernist assignations of group identity, group characteristics, and multi-generational racial or systemic guilt. So it's no stunner to see that one of the biggest homes of self-righteous collectivist identity politics and cultural Marxism, the famously fatuous NPR, just told Americans, especially white males over 40, to purge their bookshelves of wrong think. Yep, it's book burning by another name, brought to you by the government-subsidized NPR and writer Juan Vidal, who says, "You may have seen the phrase decolonize your bookshelf floating around. In essence, it is about actively resisting and casting aside the colonialist ideas of narrative, storytelling, and literature that have pervaded the American psyche for so long." I always sound like Crichton when I do that. "Mr. Lister, sir, do you need some ironing done?" Which, of course, provides a mightily presumptuous foundation that colonialist ideas of narrative, storytelling, and literature have pervaded the American psyche, whatever that is, for so long. How long, one can't be sure, because this is one of those prejudicial throwaway lines that, it seems, many collectivists just assume to be true and don't define or explicate. Vidal doesn't explore things like Aristotle's Poetics, nor divine the colonialist formulae that is somehow hidden therein by the Athenian philosopher, nor does Vidal look at the Babylonian epic of Gilgamesh, or Hindu legends, or Asian myths, or Norse or African, or Hebrew, technically non-Caucasian, or American Indian folklore that somehow conform to the same pattern of narrative structure and storytelling as many of the most popular enduring creations in Western literature and popular fiction. No, he seems to have his own narrative to project. If you are white, take a moment to examine your bookshelf. What do you see? What books and authors have you allowed to influence your worldview and how you process the issues of racism and prejudice toward the disenfranchised? Who are the disenfranchised? What is this prejudice? Is Vidal not guilty of prejudging people as well? After all, prejudgment is the clockwork ticking in the twin time bombs of identity politics and unwarranted shaming that leftists so often employ to gain political power over people. Have you considered that if you identify as white and read only the work of white authors, you are in some ways listening to an extension of your own voice on repeat? While the details and depth of experience may differ, white voices have dominated what has been considered canon for eons. That means non-white readers have had to process stories and historical events through a white author's lens. The problem goes deeper than that anyway, considering that even now, 76% of publishing professionals, the people you might call the gatekeepers, are white. Of course, what Vidal doesn't bother to mention is that the vast majority of those white people are women. We're talking nearly 80% of them. And that's just the traditional publishing market. As Alison Flood of The Guardian, not exactly a bastion of right-wingism, writes, a survey of American publishing has found that it is blindingly white and female, with 79% of staff white and 78% women. But Mr. Vidal doesn't seem concerned with women dominating the publishing gateways of the old houses, and he certainly doesn't ask why a colonial narrative tradition that somehow reflects whiteness, and one can infer racism, sexism, and the evil capitalist structure that has kept the disenfranchised down for, as he so precisely writes, so long, possibly could see females, and by the way, how dare the Guardian assume gender, completely dominate the halls of the big publishers. Curiously, he also doesn't mention that women dominate self-publishing as well. But once more, that bastion of conservatism, The Guardian, offers a journalist who actually bothers to report the information, writes Maggie Brown. Alison Braverstock, an associate professor in publishing at Kingston University, Surrey, said her research shows a clear gender split, with 65% of self-publishers being women and 35% men. Whoops. But staring at these superficial numbers is, in a way, to buy into Mr. Vidal's leftist nursery rhyme that somehow reader preferences and market popularity are driven by colonialism and other prejudicial labels he can assign to some group that happens to be the preferred leftist target of the year. It turns out individuals in a market who are free to show what they like end up doing so, and sellers can find all kinds of niches to prosper. You know, for 20 years, I spent spare time working at a bookstore, a store that saw, as my employer informed me when training me, at least 75% of sales coming from romance novels, and females comprised almost all the buyers of said product. And strangely, Mr. Vidal, of all the romance subgenres, including historical, contemporary, urban, paranormal, and romantic suspense, there was only one male author whose work was on those shelves. His name was Lee Greenwood. He wrote Western historical romances, and many women didn't know he was male because of the spelling of his first name. Should bookstores have purged their shelves of the women to somehow create a balance of male and female? Or should the readers have been left the heck alone and not ignorantly been accused of being sexist or prejudiced against men? Likewise, one of the best horror suspense science fiction authors I know, a multiple Bram Stoker Award winner, put together an anthology a few years ago, and he said he would, as most editors do, strip names from the story submissions to judge them by their merit. That's just not right. You can't have it because leftist social justice warriors swarmed over him like fire ants, telling him there had to be greater representation of women. And of course, telling him that as a man, he had ingrained biases. But that prejudges a man, eliminating his own identity as an individual. How about they let him do whatever the heck he wants to do, and then let readers do whatever the heck they want to do, and leave people alone without accusing them of inherent racism or unrecognized privilege, especially when the leftist magistrates don't know the first thing about an individual's background or the interests of readers. As actor Morgan Freeman has noted more than once, at a certain indefinable point, media and political obsession with race and identity politics ends up fueling racial divides.
It seems like every single day on television I'm talking about race, and it's because of the news cycle, it's in the news, but sometimes I get so tired of talking about it, I want to just go, this is over, can we move on?
And if you talk about it, it exists.
Right.
It's not like it exists and we refuse to talk about it, but making it a bigger issue than it needs to be is the problem we have.
Magnifying problems and making them easier pickings for race baiters and opportunists of every kind.
How are we going to get rid of racism until...
Stop talking about it.
At a certain point, folks might want to pull back and see whether areas of life that people like NPR's Vidal claim are reflections of colonialism and dominant white male invasion actually can be set aside and not used as ammunition in racial politics. And while they're at it, they might want to ask NPR's editors how they can't feel shame publishing this colonialism drivel when it's NPR itself that colonizes American airwaves and invades our wallets every year as an integral part of its tax-fueled, propaganda-filled existence. The hypocrisy is rich. Unfortunately, I'm not as rich as I could be, and neither are you, because of these tax-fueled predators. Amazing. Hey, thanks so much for watching, everybody. Don't forget, if you're watching on YouTube, like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Please share these with friends because we know that MRC-TV has been targeted by many of the big tech gurus out there. And feel free to comment. I'll be hopping into the comments all the time. And don't forget, head over to MRCTV.org to find out all the latest news that's being written about and published by the writers there. And if you want some great outfits, some great swag, go to MRC-store. For MRC TV, I'm Gardner Goldsmith.